What if I told you that one of the most powerful military alliances in the world today might actually be a reincarnation of a regime we thought was defeated in 1945? The evidence hiding in plain sight reveals how Germany, once defeated and occupied, managed to transform itself into the economic and political center of Europe through NATO's framework and expansion. The stunning connections between NATO and the Third Reich will make you question everything you thought you knew about global politics. While not a literal rebirth of Nazi Germany, the parallels between historical German ambitions and NATO's evolution demand our critical attention. This analysis explores NATO as a potential Fourth Reich, examining Germany's pivotal role in the alliance's origins, operations, and eastward expansion. The term Reich historically denotes German imperial power, with the Third Reich being Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1945. A Fourth Reich suggests a revival of German dominance, expansionism, or influence, albeit in a transformed context. While NATO is a multilateral democratic alliance led by the United States, we'll examine its historical roots, Germany's strategic position within it, and its eastward expansion to draw provocative parallels. In May 1945, as the Third Reich collapsed in total defeat, few could have imagined Germany's remarkable rehabilitation. The country was divided, occupied, and banned from maintaining significant military forces. Within a decade, this would dramatically change. NATO was established in 1949 in the wake of World War II, primarily to counter Soviet expansion in Europe. Its founding members included the United States, Canada, and 10 Western European nations. But West Germany's inclusion in 1955 marked a critical turning point. The alliance's origin was twofold: to contain communism and to rehabilitate West Germany as a bulwark against the Soviet Union. This strategic integration allowed Germany, defeated and divided after the war, to rebuild its military and industrial capacity under Western oversight. Germany's role in NATO's early years was not one of overt leadership, but of calculated reintegration. The Third Reich had relied on rearmament and alliances to reassert power. Similarly, NATO provided a framework for Germany to regain military strength, albeit within a democratic and multilateral structure. Through NATO's framework, Germany was able to rebuild its military capabilities with international approval. What makes this development particularly significant is how it transformed the narrative of German power from threat to necessity. This strategic repositioning allowed Germany to rebuild its military-industrial complex with international support, a striking parallel to how the Weimar Republic found ways to circumvent military restrictions after World War I. The difference, of course, was that this time Germany's revival happened within a democratic alliance structure. Today, Germany sits at the geographical and strategic center of NATO, hosting more alliance bases and facilities than any European member state. The headquarters of U.S. Army Europe in Wiesbaden, numerous air bases, and major NATO command centers all operate on German soil. This central positioning isn't merely symbolic. It gives Germany significant leverage in alliance decision-making and operations. Germany's influence within NATO has grown significantly since its post-war reintegration. Economically, Germany has leveraged its NATO membership to become Europe's undisputed powerhouse. With the continent's largest economy and as the dominant force within the European Union, Germany exercises a form of economic influence that complements and enhances its military position within NATO. And this dual power, military security through NATO and economic dominance through the EU, has placed modern Germany in a position reminiscent of its historical aspirations for European leadership, achieved through dramatically different means. The German defense industry, which has its roots in the industrial giants that once armed the Wehrmacht, has flourished under NATO's umbrella. Companies like Rheinmetall and Krauss-Maffei-Wegmann have become leading suppliers of military equipment to NATO forces. This creates a profitable symbiosis between German industry and alliance operations. While occurring within a legitimate international framework, this parallels how the Third Reich's industrial base fueled its military ambitions. Politically, Germany has shaped NATO's agenda, particularly in supporting the alliance's expansion into Eastern Europe. This aligns with its own interests, securing markets, energy routes, and influence in the region, reminiscent of the Third Reich's economic exploitation of Eastern territories, though achieved through trade and diplomacy rather than conquest. NATO's dramatic eastward expansion after the Cold War represents one of the most significant geopolitical shifts of the past 3 decades. From 16 members in 1990 to 30 members today, the alliance has absorbed most of the former Warsaw Pact countries and even former Soviet republics. Germany has been one of the most vocal advocates for this expansion, particularly into territories that have historically been within its sphere of influence. This push eastward carries unsettling historical echoes of the Third Reich's Drang nach Osten, drive to the east, to dominate Eastern Europe. Following German reunification in 1990, German companies moved aggressively into Eastern European markets, often preceding these countries' formal NATO membership. In Poland, the Baltic states, and elsewhere, German investment became a dominant economic force. This economic penetration created relationships of dependency that paralleled historical patterns. While conducted through legitimate business rather than occupation, this approach echoes previous eras of German influence in the region. Germany's support for NATO missions in Eastern Europe, such as enhanced forward presence in the Baltics and air policing operations, has established a German military presence in regions historically central to German strategic thinking. German troops now operate in areas that were primary targets of previous German expansionism, though now as allies rather than conquerors, a transformation that obscures but doesn't erase the historical resonances. The German defense industry has experienced remarkable growth since the country's integration into NATO. Today, German arms manufacturers rank among the world's largest, with companies like Rheinmetall reporting record profits and expanding global market share. This industry's revival parallels the military-industrial complex that powered the Third Reich, though now operating within legal international arms markets rather than a war economy. The connection between German military industry and territorial influence remains, though in a transformed context. NATO's operations and ongoing tensions with Russia have provided consistent justification for increased defense spending, directly benefiting German manufacturers. Each new NATO mission or heightened alert status translates into contracts for German industry. This creates an economic incentive for Germany to support alliance expansion and operations. This alignment of economic interest with military strategy echoes historical patterns where German industry profited from territorial ambitions. This creates an economic incentive for Germany to support alliance expansion and operations. This alignment of economic interest with military strategy echoes historical patterns where German industry profited from territorial ambitions. Germany has participated in these missions to varying degrees, enabling it to project military power globally in ways unimaginable in the immediate post-WFU era. This global reach would have been inconceivable without the legitimizing framework that NATO provides. The Kosovo intervention in 1999 was particularly significant for Germany, marking the first combat deployment of German forces since WFU's. German aircraft conducted bombing missions as part of Operation Allied Force, breaking a powerful post-war taboo. This milestone allowed Germany to reestablish itself as a military power willing to use force beyond its borders, a capability that previous German regimes had aggressively pursued, but now achieved through multilateral consent rather than unilateral action. In Afghanistan, Germany took command of the Northern Regional Command, overseeing military operations across multiple provinces. German forces engaged in combat operations that, while justified as counterterrorism and nation-building, nevertheless placed German troops in a position of military authority over foreign territory. This created a situation with uncomfortable historical echoes, despite the multilateral context. German military authority over foreign populations was normalized through the NATO framework in ways that would have been unacceptable outside the alliance context. The economic relationship between Germany and other NATO members, particularly in Eastern Europe, reveals patterns of dependency and resource extraction that, while conducted through trade rather than conquest, create outcomes with historical parallels. German businesses have gained access to cheap labor, resources, and markets throughout Eastern Europe following NATO expansion, creating economic benefits that flow disproportionately to Germany. The means are different, but certain outcomes echo historical patterns. Countries like Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary have become integrated into German manufacturing supply chains, providing lower cost production while final assembly and the highest value aspects of manufacturing remain in Germany. The flow of labor from Eastern NATO members to Germany further benefits the German economy, while German banks have established dominant positions in Eastern European financial markets, giving German financial institutions significant control over these economies. One of the most significant transformations facilitated by NATO has been the reframing of German power and influence. Through NATO's multilateral structure and democratic values, German military capability and economic dominance have been legitimized in ways that make historical comparisons seem inappropriate or offensive. One of the most significant transformations facilitated by NATO has been the reframing of German power and influence. Through NATO's multilateral structure and democratic values, German military capability and economic dominance have been legitimized in ways that make historical comparisons seem inappropriate or offensive. The evolution of terminology around German military activities is particularly revealing. German forces are now described as participating in peacekeeping, stabilization operations, or crisis management, terms that frame the projection of military power in humanitarian and defensive terms. This linguistic shift has been essential to making German military power acceptable in a post-World War II context. The vocabulary transformation helps obscure continuities in German strategic interests while emphasizing the dramatic changes in methods and values. Within NATO's complex command structure, Germany has secured positions of influence that belie the public perception of American dominance. German officers hold key positions throughout the alliance hierarchy, including command roles in multinational corps, NATO response force components, and specialized commands. This quiet integration of German military leadership into NATO's command structure has happened gradually but systematically. German officers in NATO command positions can direct operations involving forces from multiple nations, creating chains of authority that transcend national boundaries. The Multinational Corps Northeast, headquartered in Szczecin, Poland, provides a telling example. This NATO command, which oversees operations in a region historically central to German strategic thinking, has frequently been led by German generals. That German officers command multinational forces in territories once occupied by the Wehrmacht represents a remarkable transformation in how German military leadership in Eastern Europe is perceived and accepted. NATO's narrative framework has been instrumental in reshaping public perception of German military power. Through careful messaging, educational programs, and public diplomacy, the alliance has helped transform the image of German forces from historical aggressors to essential partners in European security. This narrative management represents a sophisticated rewriting of how German military power is understood and accepted. Alliance-sponsored historical commemorations now place German forces alongside other NATO members as defenders of freedom, rather than emphasizing Germany's unique historical role. One of the most significant parallels between NATO's structure and historical German governance models lies in the separation between civilian democratic processes and military command hierarchies. While NATO member states maintain democratic governments, the alliance's military structure operates with significantly less democratic oversight or transparency. This creates a form of dual state reminiscent of historical German governance models. NATO's command decisions, particularly in crisis situations, often bypass normal parliamentary processes in member states, with operations authorized through streamlined procedures that limit democratic input. NATO's expansion into Eastern Europe has created a strategic buffer zone between Russia and the core NATO members in Western Europe, particularly Germany. This buffer of smaller NATO members serves a function parallel to historical concepts of frontier territories, absorbing potential conflicts before they reach German soil. While depicted as mutual defense, this arrangement creates strategic depth, benefiting Central Powers more than frontier states. Countries like Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states now host forward NATO deployments, positioning alliance forces, including German contingents along Russia's western border. Germany's support for NATO expansion into Eastern Europe and the Balkans aligns closely with its economic interests in securing energy transit routes and resources. The integration of countries along key energy corridors into NATO has helped secure German access to energy supplies while placing these transit routes under alliance protection. The Baltic Sea region, now largely surrounded by NATO members, has become critical for German energy security through projects like Nord Stream. German support for Baltic states' NATO membership helped secure this region, creating a maritime zone largely under alliance protection that safeguards energy infrastructure vital to the German economy. NATO has developed sophisticated capabilities in information operations and strategic communications, areas where historical German military thinking placed significant emphasis. These capabilities allow the alliance to shape perceptions and narratives in ways that advance its strategic objectives while countering opposing viewpoints. The labeling of alternative perspectives on NATO as disinformation or propaganda creates a framework where critical analysis of the alliance or German influence within it can be delegitimized without substantive engagement. This approach to information management has troubling parallels to historical methods of controlling public discourse, albeit in a dramatically different political context. Germany's economic dominance within Europe, facilitated by the security framework NATO provides, extends to monetary policy and financial governance. Through institutions like the European Central Bank and European Stability Mechanism, German economic principles and interests shape policies affecting all European NATO members. NATO's positioning of Russia as a perpetual security threat provides ongoing justification for alliance cohesion and expansion, a narrative framework that particularly benefits Germany by legitimizing increased military capability and eastward focus. This portrayal of Russia as an intractable adversary has parallels to historical German strategic conceptions. The parallels between NATO's structure, Germany's role within it, and historical patterns of German power and influence in Europe are striking and worthy of critical examination. The alliance has facilitated Germany's reemergence as a European power center with global reach, economic dominance, and military capabilities extending far beyond its borders. What this analysis reveals is not that NATO is a Fourth Reich in any literal sense, but rather that power, influence, and strategic interests display continuities even as the methods, values, and contexts transform completely. Germany's central position in European affairs, a geopolitical reality with deep historical roots, has been reestablished through NATO in ways that break decisively with historical methods. This tension between continuity and transformation defines NATO's relationship to European history. The alliance has not erased historical patterns of influence and power, but has transformed how they operate, replacing conquest with consensus, occupation with integration, and exploitation with interdependence. Understanding these transformations provides a more nuanced perspective on NATO's role in European affairs than either uncritical acceptance or conspiratorial rejection can offer.